The Missouri Tigers are a super talented team, and Texas A&M needs to watch out.
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. You are Locked On the Texas A&M Aggies. I'm your host, Matt Galatzan, publisher of Texas A&M Aggies on SI. Thank you so much for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Zach Dimmitt is with me today. And Zach, the Missouri Tigers are a pretty good football team. I know they're coming off a loss to Vanderbilt, but you know they're still a very, very difficult team to deal with. They're 6-2, and they've played 4 SEC games so far. All of those games have been decided by a score. One of them went to overtime with Auburn, but they were within one score against then number 10 ranked Vanderbilt. They lost to then number 8 Alabama by 3 points. So they have been right there against the best of the best, and there's really no reason to believe that based on the strengths of this team and what makes them dangerous, that they can't do the same thing with Texas A&M.
Yeah, Missouri is right in the playoff hunt. They're on the outside looking in right now, but certainly, like with Tennessee's case, Tennessee is pretty much out at this point. Missouri is still well within the range of the CFP. If they can beat A&M, they still have Mississippi State, Oklahoma, Arkansas. Beating A&M and Oklahoma, that would give them 2 more quality wins on the resume. And so they're right in the mix of things. So they still have a lot to play for. A team like LSU, when A&M went to Death Valley, they still had something to play for, but they were kind of down and out. And then Casey Concepcion's punt return touchdown really just put the nail in the coffin there. So, a dangerous team, good on both sides, as we'll talk about here in a second. But yeah, going to Columbia is not going to be easy. I know A&M dominated Missouri last season. Le'Veon Moss I think it was a career day for him. I don't think the same will happen this time. I think A&M it's going to be another close one. I said that about the LSU game. I know that, but obviously, things turned out way different than what we expected there. I thought it would be a close game in Death Valley, and A&M would win. I didn't think they'd blow the Tigers out of the water. But these Tigers in Columbia, I think it'll be a lot closer. Missouri's going to be a really tough team.
Yeah, I mean, based on the trend, 4 SEC games, 4 one-score games, 2 of those were against top 10 teams. A&M's another top 10 team. The trend would say that they will keep this game close. And I think that, at least we're each going to mention one of Missouri's strengths and what makes them so dangerous here. I'm going to go first. I think it's their defense. Their defense is really, really good, Zach. As it stands right now, they are 3rd in the SEC in scoring defense, only giving up 16.8 points per game on the season. They're 4th against the run, 90.38 yards per game. They're 1st against the pass, only giving up 155.4 yards per game. And yes, Ty Simpson is on that. He's in the mix for that. Even with him in there, they still have that top-ranked pass defense in the SEC. They have the number 1 ranked total defense in the SEC, 245.8 yards per game. And they're doing it in really every level of the defense. And that's one of the things that makes them so impressive. They rank 24th in the country in defensive stop rate, which is really, really good. Really, really good. In terms of SEC teams, they're only behind Texas, Oklahoma, and LSU in that category, in Alabama in that category. So really, really talented defense up there in Columbia, and it could keep things close for them against the Aggies.
Yeah, and this obviously isn't the same A&M offense that we saw last season. This is an A&M offense that has lots of explosiveness to it when they want to, and they got some versatility. And so it'll be a challenge for Missouri's defense, but is also going to be a challenge for A&M's offense. I know the Aggies have shown that they can win games in different ways. A shootout against Notre Dame, putting up lots of points on the board in different ways against LSU, winning close in a defensive battle against Auburn, shootout against Arkansas. It's been, A&M, they can win in different ways. A lot of teams are one-dimensional. The Aggies are not that way. But I think that this will be one of those games. I hope I'm right this time. I hope I'm right about an Aggie win, but I hope I'm right with my prediction that it'll be a little bit closer, so I don't look like a fool again. But that's besides the point. But I think, yeah, I agree with you. Missouri's defense is up there for sure. There's a lot of good defenses in the SEC this season, and I think Missouri is definitely up there. But yeah, for my strength of theirs, I'm going to go with the rushing attack. When you look at the country, Missouri's 10th in rushing yards per game, so that's number one in the SEC. You got other teams like the service academies are all going to be up there. Indiana and Oregon both have great rushing attacks as well. They're in the top 10. Missouri's right there at number 10. That's pretty impressive stuff there from Eli Drinkwitz's offense. Ahmad Hardy, we're going to mention him as well in our players to watch, but he makes that offense go when it comes to rushing attack. Yes, a lot of his production this season kind of came in the non-con against not the greatest of competition. Let's be honest about that. Still a super talented guy. I mean, he had 250 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns against Louisiana. I don't care who you're playing. That's pretty impressive stuff right there. And he's a smaller back. He's obviously got power and some speed. 71-yard rushing touchdown this season. But against Alabama, he got contained a little bit there. And despite that, they were still in that game on the very last drive with a chance to win. So it's not like he's their entire offense, but he's a big part of it. So, against Auburn, we saw what their defense did against A&M. I know penalties had a big part to play in the Aggies not scoring as much as they could have in that game. But against Auburn, 2 rushing touchdowns there, decent stuff. And so, he has 5 100-yard rushing games this season. 4 of those were in non-conference, so that's worth noting. But 138 rushing yards against South Carolina in SEC play, then 97 yards in the loss against Vanderbilt. So this is a guy that's super talented. Missouri's rushing attack, is going to be something to watch, especially with A&M having trouble against the run a little bit this season. We saw that against UTSA. Against Arkansas. Arkansas is a very talented offense, very explosive. Don't get me wrong there. I think they're like second in the SEC behind Missouri in rushing yards per game. So, there's still questions about A&M's defense, about the consistency. But I think when the Aggies are at their best, it's still going to be an elite defense. And so, got to watch out for Ahmad Hardy for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the non-con as a big reason for all of his 100-yard rushing games, but Kansas is a Power 4 team. He ran for 112 yards and a touchdown in that game. And what I kind of like to look at when it comes to rushing production more than just total yards is yards per carry, because I think that that's a pretty good metric as well. Against Alabama, he averaged 4.3 yards per carry. Against Auburn, he had his off game. He still scored 2 touchdowns. He averaged 2.4 yards per carry, but then he bounced back against Vanderbilt, who has a good rushing defense, and averaged 4.9 yards per carry. He's a really good back. He leads the SEC in rushing. He's 4th in the nation in rushing. And if there has been a weakness to this Texas A&M team, it has been defending the ground game on defense. So we're kind of nitpicking when we say there's a weakness, but at the same time, one of the best running backs in the country comes in. One of the guys that is ahead of Ahmad Hardy barely in rushing yards is Robert Henry Jr., who torched Texas A&M at the very beginning of the season. So anything could happen there. That is definitely something to pay attention to there for the Aggies as we head into this weekend. Let's take our first break. When we come back, we'll give you some more players to watch for this matchup on Saturday, and then in segment 3, we'll really change gears and because basketball season started. But let's start with players to watch for Missouri and go from there. Stick with us after this break, and we'll be right back. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can combine your live bets into same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout, and it keeps the game exciting, especially when your team's making a late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting app of the NBA. All right, so players to watch. There's actually quite a few on Missouri on both sides of the ball. And there's a reason that Missouri has had such a successful season. Not only is their defense incredible, at least it has been for the most part this season, but their offense has also been very, very good. 35.4 points per game is fifth in the SEC. They have the number one rushing offense in the SEC, 235.5 yards per game. Their passing offense ranks 10th, but 237.3 yards per game makes them pretty balanced. And then in total offense, they rank fourth in the SEC behind only Tennessee, Arkansas, and Ole Miss at 472.8 yards per game. So they're a force to be reckoned with. They've taken a lot of good teams to the brink. Alabama, Vanderbilt, as we mentioned in the last segment. We won't talk too much about Ahmad Hardy in this segment because we talked about him in the last one, but he is most certainly a player to watch for Texas A&M. Another one that on the offensive side of the ball that's going to be particularly interesting to watch, we touched on this yesterday during our show, but true freshman starting quarterback Matt Zollers. He came in against Vanderbilt in relief of Bo Pribula, who is lost for the season now with, I believe, a dislocated ankle. Big loss for the Tigers there, but Matt Zollers is an incredibly talented quarterback. I watched him at the Elite 11 camp last year in Los Angeles. He was very, very good. He's a special talent, that is for sure. And he put them in position to win, or at least tie the game against Vanderbilt. They weren't able to get it done, but he's a very, very talented player. He's super athletic. He's got great arm talent. He moves around very, very well. He keeps his eyes downfield. He's really, really good at like those highlight reel off-platform throws, and that kind of quarterback can be very dangerous for anybody to defend. And it's not only was it a major recruiting win for them, getting him out of the state of Pennsylvania away from Penn State, but they also beat the likes of Georgia and Florida for his commitment, which was a big win then for Eli Drinkwitz. And some of the numbers that he put up when he was in high school, his senior year, 2,917 yards and 37 touchdowns with just 2 interceptions, ran for 420 yards and 7 scores, and was and led his team to the 6A quarterfinals in Pennsylvania. Completed 62.8% of his passes. So this guy may be a true freshman, but he is certainly somebody to keep an eye on when the Missouri Tigers take the field on Saturday.
Yeah, definitely, and 6'4" as well. So not a short guy at all. That's pretty tall there for football standards. The only thing with A&M that you got to watch out for is there's not a lot of film on this guy. Before the Vanderbilt game, he only had six pass attempts for the entire season. Threw a touchdown against Central Arkansas in a blowout, but didn't really play too much in that game, despite it being a blowout. So you mentioned some of the rushing production he had in high school. He hasn't shown much of that this season yet either. His longest rush is 6 yards against Vanderbilt. So you never know what you're going to get when it comes to that. The only film that A&M really is going to have on him is from the Vanderbilt game. And that game was kind of a defensive battle. Both offenses really struggled there. But you saw what he could do on the last play of the game where Vanderbilt or Missouri almost won, catching the Hail Mary at the goal line. He obviously has the arm talent to get it there. Threw a pretty nice ball. I mean, Vanderbilt was kind of out of position there at the goal line, but he's got the talent for sure, and some unpredictability there because of the lack of film. But if you're A&M, maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe you just run your schemes, you run your stuff. It doesn't matter who's at quarterback. You're going to play it the same way. It's different because some defenses may change what they do when it comes to a different quarterback, but with A&M. The defense hasn't been perfect this season, but you're undefeated up to this point, and your defense has gotten you there for sure in some of these games. So maybe not change it up too much. Depends on how the first half goes. Maybe make adjustments, but there is a level of unpredictability there. So that'll be something to watch. But he's still a true freshman, so they're going to be prone to mistakes regardless of the talent. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And then for my other one on the defensive side of the ball, I'm going to go with Zion Young. I know you're going to talk about another player for Missouri here in a second, but Zion Young is an edge rusher for Missouri. He's not their leading sack artist, but he's a veteran player, a senior. He's second on the team in sacks with 5, and he's part of this pass rush that has already put up 23 sacks this season. And a major player to watch for Texas A&M, whose offensive line has been very, very good this year. But I don't think that they have faced a group of edge rushers like they're about to see with Missouri, with 2 guys who can really dominate the game.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. I'll get to my defensive guy as well in a second, but I'm gonna go back to offense for a second here. For me, it's Kevin Coleman Jr., wide receiver for Missouri. He's their leading pass catcher, leads them in receptions and yards. Only 1 touchdown this season, though, and that came in the second game of the season, I believe. So he's due for a touchdown, and I think hopefully Will Lee, Dalton Brooks, all those guys in the secondary, they're going to be aware of that, and knowing he's going to be hungry for a touchdown. He was actually the one that caught the Hail Mary from Missouri at the end of the game against Vanderbilt, so almost got into the end zone there. This guy's probably going to be pretty hungry against A&M. He's got 51 catches, 558 yards this season. The second closest guy on Missouri's roster in catches is Marquise Johnson with 28 catches. So no one's really close to Kevin Coleman Jr. when it comes to production this season. It's just about the lack of end zone production there for him. So obviously going to be a guy to watch, 10.9 yards per catch this season. But A&M, despite the run defense kind of having its issues at times, the secondary has tons of talent, lots of continuity there as well. So you'd expect maybe Will Lee the third, being assigned to him, or they do the strategy of putting Will Lee on Missouri's number 2 receiver and then doubling Kevin Coleman Jr. We'll see what happens there. But yeah, and then for defense, I'm going to go with Missouri's leading sack guy, which is Damon Wilson II. He's got 6.5 sacks this season. He has an interception as well. So nice versatility there at being a defensive end. He's no Cassius Howe. Let's be real about that. But this guy, he had 2 sacks against Alabama. He had 2 sacks in the opener against Central Arkansas, and you think, oh, it's Central Arkansas. Yeah, he's not going to have production later in the season. But as I mentioned, 2 sacks against Alabama, a sack against Vanderbilt. His interception actually came against Vanderbilt last week. So, this guy's kept up his play during SEC action, and so definitely got to watch there. When you got versatility on the defensive line, you don't have just one guy dominating all the sack numbers. That can spell some trouble. A&M's offensive line has been elite, though. Let's be real about that. But they're going to have to watch out for multiple guys and not just one, where they can focus a double team. So it's going to be on the tackles on the outside to really step up and protect Marcel Reed there. But Marcel Reed's legs could play a part. You got both the edges trying to come around, on the sides. They'll maybe do some stunts a little bit. You never know. But Marcel Reed's going to have to take advantage of his legs a little bit in this game. You never know what could happen. So I think Damon Wilson II, good guy there to watch for sure on defense for an elite Missouri defense.
Yeah, and he's a former Georgia Bulldog, former 5-star recruit, former Georgia Bulldog. We know the kinds of edge rushers that Georgia has put out in the past. Georgia ranks last in the SEC in sacks. You would think they wish that they held on to Damon Wilson after what we've seen this season from that pass rush. One more honorable mention for me, Brett Norfleet, the tight end for Missouri. He's got 5 touchdown catches this year. And then Jude James, the other tight end, has 2 touchdown catches. So when these guys get in the red zone, they target those tight ends. So that's definitely something that Texas A&M is going to have to watch out for as well. All right, let's go to our next segment. We're going to change gears in a big way here and talk basketball. Aggie basketball is back, and they got a dominant win last night in the first edition of Bucky Ball. So we're going to talk about that next year on Locked On Aggies. College football is back, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that delivers the advantage back to the fans. It's it's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. The app made it super simple. I could even see the exact view from my seat before buying. And I also love the zone deals too. Pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save big. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. Bucky Ball is here, Zach, and it went pretty well in Game 1. The Aggies came out in their season opener and blew away the Northwestern State Demons 98-68. They had 56 points in the first half, took a 21-point lead into the locker room at halftime. And then in the second half, they outscored the Demons 42-33. Some standouts for the Aggies in this one. It was really a balanced effort from them all the way around offensively. Rashawn A.G. had 12. Jakari Lane had 12. Rylen Griffin had 13. Ruben Dominguez came off the bench and just lit it up from the three-point line. He had 18 points. He was 4 of 7 from 3. And Josh Holloway also added 13. Then you had Frederico. Frederico had 8. Pop Isaacs added 8. And Frederico also had 8 boards and a block, 3 for 4 from the field. So this was a very balanced attack for the Aggies on Monday night. And based on our first view of Bucky Ball, it looks like this is going to be a pretty exciting team to watch.
Yeah, they may be flying under the radar a little bit in the SEC, which is how dominant the conference was last season and probably will be this season. And that's okay. I think it's going to be to A&M's benefit to kind of fly underneath the radar, because the past couple of seasons with Buzz Williams, I know those teams had their issues, but A&M was consistently, near the top of one of the best conference in the country. And so it's a completely different style. Buzz Williams is all about rebounding and defense and hustle, and the Aggies really, really thrived at that. And now you completely flip the switch and you focus on fast-paced offense, shooting. You still have to play defense and hustle and rebound. Those are, non-negotiables when it comes to college basketball, regardless of what your scheme is. But you really like to see the balanced attack, the good shooting, because A&M last season was like one of the worst shooting teams in the conference, despite being a number 4 seed. It wasn't their strength. And so, you really like to see that. And then, there's not really like a star necessarily when you look at the box score from last night, but you're still going to get Mackenzie McBacco back from his injury. I forget which injury he's dealing with. I believe it's something with his foot. But, you got him from Indiana out of the transfer portal. This guy's a former McDonald's All-American. He's super talented. He may not be like, necessarily the star or the go-to scorer down the stretch, because, you want to have balanced attacks. But when you add him to the mix, it's going to be really exciting to see what this roster can do. Rylen Griffin, Kansas transfer there. He was pretty coveted by a lot of teams, this offseason out of the portal, and A&M got him. Bucky McMillan got him despite not really having a roster at all when he first got hired. And so putting all these guys together, got pretty much no returners from last season. And so, pretty impressive performance. It is just one game, one non-conference game against, Northwestern State team that's, not the greatest, obviously, but you like to see the balance. You like to see a roster full of, solid veterans all come together. You mentioned Pop Isaacs. He's been around. And so having him come off the bench, that's a pretty good luxury. Because I think, he had a lot on his shoulders when he was at Texas Tech, at Creighton. He got injured at Creighton and missed a lot of time there, but he has had a lot on his shoulders in the past, as kind of being like this guy that can, be seen as a star guard. And I think his role will be better here at A&M, potentially coming off the bench as he works his way, through the season, because they just got so many talented guards, and so having him as a depth piece could work in their favor for sure. But yeah, you really like what you see, but don't want to get expectations up too high because it's a long season. But there's no reason why A&M can't make a little bit of noise in the SEC. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and super impressive job by Bucky. There was 0 returners on this roster. He had
Right.
no players on this team, and then he went out and he got a bunch of dudes in the transfer portal. It looks like it's going to work out pretty well. Arguably, your best player, Mackenzie Mbako, wasn't even on the floor in this game, and you still won by 30. So that's really, really impressive. Some other things that really stood out to me last night about what the Aggies were able to do. They out-rebounded Northwestern State 44-32. 17 offensive boards for the Aggies as well. They forced 16 turnovers, at 24 points off those turnovers, 14 fast break points, and 48 of their 98 points came in the paint. You can't really ask for much more than that. They shot 49% from the field, 35.5% from three, and they had a few turnovers. They had 12, but nothing really to be too concerned about there. And just, this team is obviously improved offensively. They seem to have pretty good chemistry as well with one another, which is really impressive to considering none of these guys have ever played together before. It's a completely new roster. And it seems, obviously, overreaction, but it seems like this team could make a push to be a top 6-7 team in the SEC, make the NCAA tournament, and if they can play offense like this, with a guy like Ruben Dominguez hitting 4 of 7 from 3, if he can do that on a consistent basis, this is a team that could be very, very dangerous in one of the best conferences in America.
Yeah, and especially with Ruben Dominguez coming off the bench and having that production, it's kind of one of those things with this roster where you might never know what you're going to get on any given night. Who's going to lead the team in scoring? You just don't know. And we saw with Auburn last night, Bethune-Cookman, they took him to overtime, at Auburn. And so I know Northwestern State probably doesn't have the talent that Bethune-Cookman had. When I watched the highlights of that game, that's a talented group that just took an SEC team to overtime. But for A&M to not avoid any sort of season opening letdown, handle business like they should, that's really positive because – early in the season with some of these teams every year, you may see a final score that's a little bit closer than you would like against some of these smaller schools. But A&M took care of business. And, in the second half, Northwestern State, scored 33 to A&M's 42. That's kind of natural in the second half with the game already out of hand. The opposing team's going to be pushing it a little bit more and getting a little bit more buckets than maybe Bucky McMillan would have liked, but it couldn't have gone better for A&M. But there's still a lot of non-conference games to play. There's going to be some hiccups. There's going to be some games that are maybe closer than Aggie fans want. But there's going to be growing pains. It's a super long season, and at the end of the day, all that matters is SEC play. And as you mentioned, if this team could be 6 or 7 in the standings in the SEC. As we saw last year, that gets you into the tournament because I believe it was like 11 teams that made it into the tournament, with like Texas being in the first 4, which technically counts as the tournament, even though it's really not. But that gets you into the tournament. And this conference, I don't really see there being any drop off. I know Florida lost last night, the defending champs. Auburn, as I mentioned, that game was close, but yeah, if you're 6 or 7 in this conference in the standings, that gets you in the tournament pretty comfortably. But like I said, it's a long season.
Absolutely. And that's going to do it for another episode of Locked On Aggies. Thank you so much for making Locked On Aggies your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On SEC. Chris Gordy breaks down the best conference in college sports, from the rivalries to the championship and every game in between. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, subscribe to our podcast, download our podcast. We're on every major platform. Follow me on X at Matt Galatzan. Follow Zach on X at Zach Dimmitt 7 with 2 M's and 2 T's. And follow us on Texas A&M Aggies on SI. Zach does some kick-ass work over there. And we'll see you next time.